Hello, my name is Lupilo. Today I want to understand the Nagorno-Karabakh tension, one of the world's longest-running conflicts. It was Mao Zedong who said that political power grows out of the barrel of a gun. That harsh lesson certainly applies to the long-running battle between Armenia and Azerbaijan over the contested territory known as Nagorno-Karabakh, where Azerbaijan has been imposing its sovereignty by force of arms. Armenia is currently the heart of one of the globe's longest-running cup. Now, you ask, what is Armenia's territory origin? What is the history of that land? Early Armenia Indo-European Armenians emerged around 8th century BC. The kingdom of Urartu 8006000 BC is considered the first Armenian empire. Legends say that the Armenians are the descendants of Haik, the founding patriarch of the Armenian nation and a descendant of Noah, whose ark ran aground on Mount Ararat after the Great Flood. In honor of this tradition, the Armenians call their nation Hayastan. Historians, on the other hand, trace the origins of Armenians back to the period between 1500 BC and 1200 BC, with the birth of a tribal confederation known as Hayasa-Azi, which resided in the western part of the Armenian plateau. Given its proximity to the Hittite Empire, violent clashes often broke out with mixed results until the Hittites finally defeated the Hayasa-Azi people at the end of the Bronze Age. Between empires, we know that, from 4th century BC to 19th century AD, Armenia was ruled by various powers including Persians, Romans, Byzantines, Arabs, Mongols, and Ottomans. Despite foreign rule, Armenians maintained their distinct culture and identity, with Christianity playing a unifying role adopted in 1st century AD. The dynasty of the Arsacids of Armenia, Arshakuni, ruled over the kingdom of Armenia from 54 to 428 and was linked to the homonymous Parthian dynasty. Two of the most important events under Arsacid rule in the history of Armenia were the conversion to Christianity by Gregory the Illuminator in 301 and the creation of the Armenian alphabet by Mesrop Mashtots in 405. The conversion of Armenia, which took place at the dawn of the 4th century and traditionally took place in the year 301, gave the Armenians the consciousness of being the first officially Christian people, well before Christianity was recognized as state religion by the Roman Empire. In 591, the great Byzantine warrior and emperor Maurice defeated the Persians and brought much of the Armenian territory into the empire. The conquest was later completed by the emperor Heraclius in 629, but in 645, the Muslim Arabs of the Caliphate attacked the region by conquering it. Thus Armenia, which once had its rulers and had been under Persians and Byzantines, came under the rule of the caliphs. As Emirate of Armenia, the region was ruled by a prince, also recognized by Byzantium, who was based in Divin, not far from Yerevan Bagratuni or Bagratini. From this date, pressure began to persuade the people to convert to Islam. But an agreement was then reached that allowed the Armenians to continue professing Christianity. In 884, the Armenian princes regained their independence, which they defended until 1045, when they were again subdued by Byzantium. In this period, Armenia experienced a cultural, political, and economic renaissance. A new capital was founded, Ani, which is said to have been populated by about 200,000 inhabitants, at a time when the European capitals did not reach 20,000 inhabitants. With the construction of Ani, nicknamed the City of 40 Gates and 101 churches, Armenia became a populous and prosperous nation that had political influence over neighboring nations. However, the feudal system gradually weakened the country by eroding the feeling of loyalty towards the central government. In 1071, after the defeat of Byzantium by the Seljuk Turks led by Alp Arslan in the Battle of Manzikert, Greater Armenia was conquered. To escape death or slavery, thousands of families left Armenia and settled in foreign lands, such as Cilicia, Poland, etc. Among these people there was also Rupin, a relative of Gagik I, the last king of Ani, who fled, together with some of the people, between the gorges of the Taurus Mountains and from there to Cilicia. After the 20th century, Armenia gained brief independence after the First World War 1918 to 1920, but in 1922 it was incorporated into the Soviet Union. During the modern era, Armenia gained independence again in 1991 after the fall of the Soviet Union. World War I and the Ottoman Empire's Armenian genocide drastically reshaped the region. As both Armenia and Azerbaijan sought independence, tensions flared particularly over Nagorno-Karabakh zone. The Soviet Union absorbed the region, incorporating Nagorno-Karabakh into Azerbaijan but granting it some autonomy. Despite Armenian pleas to unite with Armenia, the Soviets refused. In 1988, Armenians in Nagorno-Karabakh demanded unification with Armenia. This sparked violence between Armenians and Azerbaijanis, which intensified with pogroms targeting Armenians in Azerbaijan. The situation escalated further as the Soviet Union dissolved. Armenia and Azerbaijan declared independence in 1991. Full-scale war erupted over Nagorno-Karabakh. Armenian forces gained the upper hand, capturing territory beyond the original Nagorno-Karabakh borders. The conflict ended in a ceasefire in 1994. Despite the ceasefire, sporadic clashes continued. Azerbaijan also undertook action seen as erasing Armenian heritage in its territories. In September 2020, a major Azerbaijani offensive inflicted a crushing defeat on Armenia. Armenia ceded control of surrounding territories and some parts of Nagorno-Karabakh itself. A Russian peacekeeping force was deployed. Since then, tensions have remained high. There have been renewed clashes, a blockade on Nagorno-Karabakh, and a brief Azerbaijani incursion into Armenia in September 2022. Most recently, in September 2023, Azerbaijan launched another offensive, capturing the remaining Armenian-held territory in Nagorno-Karabakh. With Nagorno-Karabakh largely depopulated, Azerbaijan now seeks an Armenia-controlled corridor to connect its Nakhchivan exclave, a move opposed by Armenia and many international actors. The future of the region remains uncertain. Large numbers of ethnic Armenians have been displaced from Nagorno-Karabakh since the territory surrendered to Azerbaijan on 20 September 2023. Local forces in Karabakh agreed to be disarmed and disbanded after an Azerbaijani military offensive triggered intense fighting. The breakaway republic and its institutions will cease to exist from 1 January 2024, the region's separatist leader has said. The territory is recognized internationally as part of Azerbaijan, but large areas of it have been controlled by ethnic Armenians for 3 decades. Fears of fresh violence rose when Azerbaijan mounted an effective blockade of a vital route into the enclave in December 2022. The Laikin corridor is the only road that connects the Republic of Armenia to Nagorno-Karabakh. It is a key artery for supplies, and residents in the territory reported severe shortages of basic food items and medication during the blockade. Azerbaijan accused Armenia of using the road to bring in military supplies, which Armenia denied. Baku also said it had offered food and aid several times via another road, but Armenians in Nagorno-Karabakh refused it. Maintaining access through the Laikin corridor and another route, the Adam road from Azerbaijan, relied heavily on the presence of Russian peacekeepers deployed in the area since 2020. But Moscow's attention and military resources have been diverted by its invasion of Ukraine. The Armenian Prime Minister accused Russia of spontaneously leaving the region. Karabakh authorities said at least 200 people had died in the fighting, while Azerbaijan said that 192 of its soldiers had been killed. Azerbaijan and the ethnic Armenians in Nagorno-Karabakh declared a ceasefire, mediated by Russia, on 20 September, which brought 24 hours of fighting to an end. The agreement said local Armenian forces would be completely disarmed and disbanded. Azerbaijan and the Karabakh authorities have since started talks about the integration of the enclave into Azerbaijan. But the territory's separatist leader, Samvel Armenian, also signed an order dissolving all state institutions from next year, effectively ending the territory's struggle for independence. Mr. Armenian said the decision to dissolve the state was based on the priority of ensuring the physical security and vital interests of the people, referencing Azerbaijan's agreement that free, voluntary and unhindered travel is ensured to residents. It is important to note that the First Nagorno-Karabakh War ended with a Russian-brokered ceasefire in 1994, after Armenian forces had gained control of Nagorno-Karabakh and areas adjacent to it. Under the deal, Nagorno-Karabakh remained part of Azerbaijan, but since then it has mostly been governed by a separatist, self-declared republic run by ethnic Armenians and backed by the Armenian government. The biggest military confrontation since the early 1990s happened 4 years ago in 2020 during 6 weeks of heavy fighting. Azerbaijan won back territory, and by the time both sides agreed to sign a Russian-brokered peace deal in November 2020, it had recaptured all the territories surrounding Nagorno-Karabakh, held by Armenia since 1994. Under the agreement, Armenian forces had to withdraw from these areas and have since been confined to a smaller part of the region. How is the conflict supported by international forces? Regional powers have been heavily involved in the conflict over the years. Turkey has close cultural and historical links to Azerbaijan. Turkish-made Bayraktar drones are said to have played a crucial role in the fighting in 2020, allowing Azerbaijan to make territorial gains. Armenia, on the other hand, traditionally had good relations with Russia. There is a Russian military base in Armenia, and both are members of the Collective Security Treaty Organization CSTO military alliance of 6 former Soviet states. But relations between Armenia and Russia have soured since Nikol Pashinyan, who led huge anti-government protests in 2018, became Armenia's prime minister. He recently said Armenia's reliance on Russia as its single source for security was a strategic error. Armenia held joint exercises with US forces earlier this month. Following the fighting in Nagorno-Karabakh, Mr. Pashinyan criticized the role Russian peacekeepers had played and publicly questioned whether remaining a CSTO member was in Armenia's interest. Russia has rejected Mr. Pashinyan's comments as unacceptable outbursts addressed against Russia that can spark nothing but rejection. The leadership in Yerevan is making a big mistake by deliberately trying to destroy Armenia's multifaceted and centuries-old ties with Russia, and by holding the country hostage to the geopolitical games of the West, Russia's foreign ministry said. The Kremlin has also criticized extremely hostile moves by Armenia to join the International Criminal Court (ICC), which has issued an arrest warrant for President Vladimir Putin. In turn, the United States established diplomatic relations with Armenia in 1992, shortly after its independence from the Soviet Union. The United States has always demonstrated its commitment to strengthening Armenia's democratic institutions and promoting sustainable and inclusive economic growth. The United States strongly supports efforts to seek a lasting and sustainable political solution to the Nagorno-Karabakh conflict through the co-chairs of the OSCE Minsk Group and to promote regional stability, peace, and prosperity. The U.S. government's assistance to Armenia has fueled efforts to strengthen Armenia's ties with Western institutions, integrate the country into the regional and global economy, diversify trade, and build resilience against external pressures. The United States and Armenia have several agreements that positively impact trade and investment, including a Trade and Investment Framework Agreement, a Trade Relations Agreement, an Investment Incentive Agreement, a Bilateral Investment Treaty, and a Scientific and Technological Cooperation. The two governments convened the U.S.-Armenia Strategic Dialogue to discuss mutual areas of cooperation. It will be useful to conclude that a consensus between Armenia and Azerbaijan is urgent in order to guarantee peace, harmony, and sustainable development without threats to the self-determination of the people. But can the ceasefire hold? Hikmet Hajiev, foreign policy advisor to the president of Azerbaijan, has made its intention very clear that if they disarm or decide to disarm, Azerbaijan is ready to stop this military involvement and begin immediate contacts with Akba. And the Armenians that we have on several occasions invited in some of the cities of Azerbaijan. And yesterday the presidential administration made a wise statement, reiterating once again our invitation to them to have this kind of context about a reintegration of all the elements. Edmund Marukian, Ambassador General of Armenia, well, we had a very bad experience regarding a ceasefire with Azerbaijan. I have no information because we have very bad connections with Nagorno-Karabakh. There is different information coming in. Now something new, which is perhaps nothing new. The attack in this process, I mean directly attacking villages and a peaceful settlement of people to expel them from Nagorno-Karabakh during the negotiations. Karabakh. What is the impact on peace negotiations? Edmund Marukian, Ambassador General of Armenia, what do you think? Is this still a present issue? The people of Nagorno-Karabakh have already lost their homes. They are forced to leave. What do you think? This provision is really present. Well, I know, that's why I say, I don't know what's going to happen. Hikmet Hajiev, Foreign Policy Advisor to the President of Azerbaijan, we support the peace agenda and think that finalizing a peace treaty between the two countries sooner is the best for the entire region. Azerbaijan also supports the concept of an integrated region of those Caucasus and, within that process, of course, in a vote in Armenia's court. Instead of seeking territorial claims from neighboring countries, Armenia should also seek good neighborly relations with neighboring countries. How will it be possible to guarantee a future of peace for the people of the first Christian territory in the world? How do Armenia's borders and geography determine its past, present, and future?
Thank you for tuning in. If you enjoyed this content, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share it with your people.